Started. So perfect. Thanks everybody for joining us today to talk about really the Google Analytics 4 migration that Google has decided to do. I'm sure any of you guys who are using Google Analytics UA are getting countless communications about the end of life of GA of the UA Universal Analytics platform and how they can help you get going with Google Analytics 4. We've already made the migration on the Ticketure side so that you can receive this information and kind of see more in depth of what the users have. So looks like most of you from the poll that's up there, most of you guys are leveraging some sort of analytics out there with surprisingly the majority of you actually using GA4 already, which is great. We're finding that a lot of marketing teams are not struggling, it's probably the wrong word, still working through the sides of that. So whenever you're looking at it from a having your marketing teams manage those data and getting the same kind of reporting out, they're just catching up. And so it's really good to kind of see that a lot of you guys are already moving over to that side. So with that, let's get started. So first off, when do I always say when, why, and how? So when do I have to do this, right? Because it is an end of life that's coming from Google. So you need to keep this time in your on your calendar if you haven't already started that migration. Second part is why in the world do I have to do this? And kind of what are the benefits? And then the latter part there is, well, how do I do this? So obviously there's part of your website is Ticketure. And so you want to be able to capture all of that information and detail around it. So with that, let's just jump straight in. So the big date, when do I have to do this? So July 1st, 2023 is the date in which Google has shared that the Universal Analytics, or what's more commonly known as UA, will stop processing new hits. So basically, it'll still be there for you to do your reporting, but it'll stop receiving any of that information, page views, conversions, all those things that you've been using for years, and will just cease to process any more of that information. Google does say that they will leave this around for, quote, at least 6 months. But they do suggest that you go ahead and do an export of that data. The crazy thing there is, to my knowledge, maybe this has changed. I didn't do a refresh, but when we did the Google Analytics 4, there was not currently a way to migrate this data effectively. Maybe there's some businesses out there that have made a business of that, because if you're like us, you had a lot of data in UA with user patterns and everything else, and to lose all that, it's a little bit of a drag, but then also you got the ability to report it in 2 different places. You can use things like Google Data Studio and some other items, if you are familiar with those repositories, to connect up and pull down and I'll use air quotes, but merge the 2 data sets together to be able to play with those. So there are options available, but there's not a way, again, to my knowledge at this point, to just say, hey, import this stuff over to like GA4 and you continue on as normal. So mark that date, July 1st, 2023. Go ahead and get started now. It's not that hard to configure. We'll go into what that takes from the Ticketure side in just a few. And also the reporting stuff is really, really nice. So obviously the next question is, well, why do I have to do this? What's going on? There's obviously an end of life. So if you want those analytics, you've either got to decide to move to any of the competitors that are out there, or go ahead and make the shift over to GA4. There are other benefits. It's also a little bit of I'm not going to say a steep learning curve, but it's a shift of a learning curve because UA is very event focused. It's very much around the events that are happening, and you're tracking, kind of things that are occurring with the website. Whereas what I find with the UA or with GA4 is that it's shifted a little bit more towards helping me understand the customer journey. So in the years I've been working in ticketing and with websites, we've noticed some tools that were out there that would really give some great visualization to user paths. How many times did they use my paid search versus others to then finally convert? And what does this user look like? Who are my my slow users? Who are the people that take 25 emails that they get and they click on before they actually make a conversion? So with all of that detail, all that is now embedded straight into GA4, which is really, really cool to kind of start slicing and dicing and really answering some of those questions. And I'll show you a couple of the ones that are out there already. Another piece that is unique with GA4 is that they've combined the different channels. So if you guys, any of you guys have apps or other types of ways in which people interact with you to make transactions, you can start embedding the GA4 tag in all of those channels. And now you're at what's called data streams. And so now you can actually see how each of those streams work, and then it aggregates them into, this person received 2 emails, went to the site 32 times, looked at 3 things on the app, and then finally converted. So being able to see, again, focusing less on what's the, I call it the techie user side of what they're doing, to more of a visitor journey. What's the customer path that they're taking is able to be worked on. And GA4 is still evolving. I mean, even as I've been working with the user interface that I've used to configure these things has changed like 5 times. And so it's a little bit of a moving piece, and I'm sure they'll nail it down a little bit more by the time it goes live. But one of their goals is obviously to try to start working around a lot of the not a work around, I guess, but continue to operate in some of these privacy areas where people are blocking everything in the browser, typically around cookies and other types of pieces, trying to make this a little bit more streamlined so we can collect a lot more information about people and their journey without feeling like we're exposing any of their information, or keeping a little bit of their privacy in place. I did find it actually easier to set up and to debug a lot of the confusing things around goals, and for those of you guys using UA, the goals and some of the mapping of events and so forth was a little bit tedious. Kind of had to think about it for a little bit. This is very much an easier configuration, especially if you let it run for a little bit. It'll kind of give you a lot of the actions, and you can say, hey, I want this also to be considered a conversion, and this action to be considered a conversion with just a check of a box, versus it being a configuration of knowing your website URLs and things along those lines. Even down to the point where on our site, if someone goes through the manage is actually them using a self-exchange, I've got a completely different path and conversion measurement to see how many people are doing that and how many people complete it, versus the purchase path, because I want to think of those users differently, because the experience is completely different. So a lot of neat ways in which you can set that up. And then last but not least, for these guys who sat through the Kibana side, I'm all about reporting. If you thought you were done with dimensions and metrics and all that, I think, again, Google Analytics 4 is right up that same line. So it'd be fun. I'll show you a couple of the reports that are out there, and then we can play around with it on our site if time permits. But it's really, again, about understanding that user and what's your site doing? What are my ads doing? What's my return on ad spend for this particular type of campaign, and all of that information. You could do okay with it with UA, but with UA, I find it just a lot easier, or with GA4 to do that, it's a lot easier. So, with Ticketure, kind of what did we do to enhance and make Ticketure itself work better with GA4 versus UA? In UA, you basically got a conversion event from Ticketure. You had page loads, and so you kind of could partially watch someone through the site. You had to do a lot of stuff with triggers and variables being passed around, but you really didn't get a lot until the person actually hit purchase, and that was that main event that we then sent over the data layer items and said, here's what the person purchased. With GA4 looking more at the journey, we also did the exact same. And so with UA, you've got basically a top one page view and the bottom one purchase, but the journey is much longer than that. So now you have an additional 4 actions there in the middle, which obviously I'll just run through them really quick. So page view, the person's just kind of browsing around. And that's mostly going to be on the events page, not the detail page, because a view item is there, kind of further in the funnel. They're looking at a specific page. And so we will pass in what page are they looking at, all those kind of details. The next thing in their cycle, basically, you could fire events through that process of scrolling down, or maybe they click on a date. We've talked about kind of firing off events for those kind of things to kind of help us figure out where the person is in the journey. But you can also do that as well. You can capture those click events and everything else to see what's happening, and kind of raise those if you are wanting to report to that level. But once they add something to cart, it's kind of that next milestone, if you will, of their journey through the system. So I viewed the item. I've now added that item into my cart. We also want to know if they remove it from the cart. At that point, we can see what is happening, see if they're removing the items versus just abandoning, or there are certain items being removed more than others. All those different types of actions allows me to know kind of what's going on with my inventory out there on the site. The second to last one there was one that we were looking at saying, how can we, the person, great, they add it to cart, they get to the final checkout page, but at that point, you can almost get a bot to do that, or you can get some sort of, keep alive pinging system that says, hey, go see if you can make it all the way to the cart page. But we wanted to see, of that, how many people actually start typing in a value on the checkout page. And so if someone actually goes to the checkout page, clicks in any of those text fields for name, email, or whichever, and hits a keystroke, we fire off a begin checkout process. So it's a little bit, kind of giving us insight into what they're doing along the way. And then ultimately, obviously, the purchase at the very end is the conversion, if you will. And you can mark any of these events as conversion. Some people want to say adding it to cart is a conversion, and purchase is a conversion. So you can monitor various purchase or conversion activities in the reporting side based upon, again, what you're looking at reporting. But these are the 6 main items that Ticketure is going to fire on to give you, again, that level of detail on those screens. And so with that information, just looking at kind of some sample data that we had around, this is just a what I call a funnel stepper. Basically, where did people view an item? So 100% of the people, I started my funnel at view item. So 100% of the people that actually got into my funnel viewed an item. 25.9% of those actually added something into cart. And again, I could segment this even further and further down if I wanted. Of that, 41% of those people actually began the checkout page, and then 21% actually finished that overall conversion. So things like that, it started my brain going, okay, well, let's, time permitting, dig into what happened along this way, add in additional events, additional triggers, additional things that I can see that tells me what happens. There's services out there that you can get that'll be able to tell you where the person went whenever they left. So, out of that, X number of people that abandoned, half of them went to, Google again or something. They went somewhere else. Or what page did they go to when they left? Is there a common trend here that they're hitting up my competitor along the way? Or, those types of analytics are there for you to go and look at. The other side of this is, hey, that's great, but view an item. A lot of people view items they have no intention to buy, so 74% abandonment didn't really scare me. But what if I actually wanted to see kind of when someone gets to the cart, and then I wanted to see maybe by product or by type of device that they're coming on? Do I see more of a drop off on mobile versus desktop? And these are things that we are always tending to look at, is trying to understand what are these confusion points potentially. We see a lot of drop off on a mobile whenever someone hits the membership, right? So we'll analyze the membership side of the house. And then we'll look at things like adding to cart. How are people interacting with the site? Do we see a big abandonment on certain styles of devices, even down to the screen sizes for typically what the sizes we're looking at to try and see, are there certain areas, maybe even certain manufacturers, the Samsung Galaxy, whatever, has a problem, or the latest iOS version renders something confusing, and we've seen an increase or a decrease in those abandonments, or an increase in conversions. We could look and see we're doing something right. Google also gives you the ability to see what are called insights, and so you can tell it, hey, look at certain things and then tell me whenever, I'll call them triggers, but show me whenever my conversion rate drops more than 10%, and it'll pop up and be like, hey, whatever, show me which of my top 5 ads over the last 30 days. On a rotating basis. And so say, hey, your average, your return on ad spend for your top campaigns went up 17%. Facebook is paying off nicely for this particular event. So there's things that I call it a little bit of AI in a way, but really it's just around intelligent reporting about what you're trying to look for, are kind of surfaced a little bit more up there in front of you. This was an interesting one that was added into the GA side. It's basically looking at your acquisition and how many touch points, how many touches does it actually take for someone to convert. I've seen this in a couple of paid services before, but now it's natively in the system and it's easy to look at. So I highlighted one here that just kind of came out because we also do support Google Things to Do. If you're not already using that, we should shoot in a support ticket or something. We can make sure you are configured there. But you can see here that this is 15th on their list, but this person was served 3 Google Things to Do ads and placements before they actually converted. We had 226 conversions for X number of dollars, et cetera. And it took an average of 4. So obviously my date range that I've got set here, they were being, I'll say, touched before that or communicated with before that. But it just gives you the ability to kind of see what are the things that I'm using that are paying off, and what's that journey, what's that path. This was one of my favorite ones here, where this was just this guy had, or person, whoever is, 24 of them, had a ton of organic search, paid searches, and everything else, and finally converted down there at the end. And of course, there's weighting that goes to all of these touches as far as who gets attributed. I can't say the word attributed the final conversion. So if you look at some of these other ones, back on the other guy probably has some, so that number 12, there was a CPC, which gets 23% of that conversion, because it's all about the number of touch points and when they happen in that cycle of that conversion. As you can see above, there's a thing called early, mid, and late touch points, which are around the frequency at which they do, and the overall start and end dates, and when they actually converted with each of those particular items. So a lot of this information is just you spend hours and hours just kind of digging and asking questions and keeping on using just the canned stuff that's already out there. So it doesn't have to do any coding or any kind of thinking about it. You just say, give me my acquisitions and give me my my conversion charts, and it'll plot all this stuff out for you. Kind of the other one here is reporting, right? So I mentioned the dimensions and metrics and all that fun that comes along with it. There's a thing, they call it Explore in Google Analytics, but it's basically all the dimensions, which are basically the screen sizes, the things that you want to report on. Think of a pivot table. It's going to be the things that are on the left. And then the metrics will be this, the values that you're summing on in place. So on the left-hand side, you can identify various segments. So give me my returning users, give me my new users, et cetera. So you can kind of segment down and drill that a little bit further. Right there above that is the segment size. So give me my dimensions, give me my metrics, and then you're just clicking, dragging them into this particular grid in order to get them defined. So here's my rows. I would click device category and drag it out. And then I would put in my views or values down here in the metrics. How many of them do I want to see? There's filtering. There's lots of other types of things you can do within that. And then also around here on the top, I didn't highlight it, but you can have multiple, if you have multiple types of things that you're looking at, you can just have, these are tabs. And so mine is, looking at it by tenant. So Ticketure has a multi-tenancy, so I can look at it by tenant, who's got various conversion rates. I'm looking at the same columns across of them, but I'm grouping them different so that I can quickly and easily hit through these. Okay, so-and-so's got a great conversion rate. Now let me put them in a filter and look at how they're converting across in this tab by device. And then I can look at them by product. I can look at them by browser. All those different pieces just allow me a quick and easy way of kind of tabbing through what's going on. And I also can look at it a holistic view. So really, really great opportunity to dig, slice, dice all of that information. So how do I do this? So now that you've got kind of just a teaser of GA4, how do you do this and how do you get it inside Ticketure? So we do have a knowledge base article. It exists for 7 months now. Although I did spend some time and made on the Google Tag Manager side, I've made a container that we can streamline the whole entire process and make it a very, very efficient effort to configure all the tags on the GTM side. And then Google Analytics is just setting up the stream ID and some basic stuff. But all that is outlined in this analytics. Once I've confirm that the container does exactly what I want it to do, then I will post it up here on this knowledge base article, as well as probably on the post for this webinar, and let everybody know that that's out there. But there are two prerequisites. Obviously, you'll need a Google Analytics account and a Google Tag Manager account. Can't really do that without those two items. So I assume you can get those all set. There are steps on how to get those things set up in that article if you need. I'm going to talk the items through quickly, and then I'll actually show them. But on the Google Analytics side, the main thing is setting up a data stream. So the data stream I mentioned earlier on is you have the ability to say, this is my web, this is my app, this is my whatever. If you don't have anything but the web, then you'll just have one data stream that you're working with. And you'll note the ID. I'll show you what that looks like or where you get that ID from. And then there are custom things you may want to look at. So if you want to define a custom conversion, audience segments, any type of custom events you may want to see, all that can be done. I highly recommend just hooking it up first and then coming back the next day. And then all of this stuff is typically populated. So you don't have to define a custom event. It'll be an event in your system because your system raised it. And so then you can say, okay, I want that to be a conversion, et cetera. So, it doesn't have to be done at the start. And then, any kind of attribution settings. There's some efforts to say in that, how many touches does a thing have, does a person have? You can say if they haven't received any kind of communication, responded within 7 days, reset their counter. And so, easy ways to kind of help narrow down that effort. On the Google Tag Manager side, the container template is going to be your first option. And then from there, you'll just adjust some variable settings. So you'll adjust the what's called the stream ID and then the triggers. So depending on your configuration, you may or may not even need the website URL. If you have other types of areas within your site that your container may be being used, you may want to stream it down just to the Ticketure side to fire these events. And so we've got an additional website URL trigger on there. All this will make a little more sense once we get into the GTM side. And then last but not least is the debug features on both Google Analytics and GTM are new features that are pretty cool. And they help out a lot whenever you're kind of just wanting to, maybe before pushing it out to the web, you want to play with it and see what's going on. So with that, I'm going to jump over to my setup, kind of start walking through that side. So Google Analytics, I'm inside that at this point. We'll go ahead and get our data stream in place. I've already set up the property and all that kind of fun stuff. If you're new to Google Analytics, great articles out there on how to get all this started. Sign up for an account, all that. I'm going to have to skip over that, especially since a lot of you guys are UA users already. You probably have an account. You'll just create another property underneath. So at this point, get the tag instructions if you want, and I walk you through the process. It says, hey, do you want a data stream? Even business says, hey, I'll create one for you, actually, using the URL and the details that's out there. So I can say, no, that's actually not my full URL. I'll just call this demo.web. It could have been both, but I'll then call that my stream. If I did want to create one from scratch, I just click on web. It brings up this exact same thing. It's like, what's the name? What's the URL that you're going to be coming from? This is the stream ID. When I say notice your stream ID, although this says stream ID, I probably should call it a little bit different. But this is the value that we're wanting to pass in. So just click on copy there. That little pop-up that came out kind of is, here's how you install it and all those things. There are other custom events and so forth that I mentioned that you could raise within this, this stream if you want. I leave these as default, but if there are certain things that you want to look for, obviously adjust those as you see fit. So once I've got that particular one in place, I've now got my demo item. I don't need to do anything else with this. There are settings and all that attribution settings and so forth I can say, but all I need is that ID. So now I switch over to Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Managers will have a lot of different tags and other things probably, but we do have that template that I mentioned. So I'm going to go ahead and click on admin. I want to import a container. I'm going to choose it from a file. So GA4 template. I'm going to insert. You can choose an existing or a default workspace. I'm just going to go default workspace. This is a big one to think of whenever you're setting this up. I always click merge just because maybe for some crazy reason I've got things over already defined with that same name. You shouldn't. Most of these, especially using our template, they're called Ticketure something. But it's always a good thing just to say merge and rename. And it kind of gives you a summary down here. This is kind of my last minute check before you see, hey, I want to delete some stuff. Especially if you say overwrite and you import an existing container and you don't merge, it will delete everything that's already in it because it thinks that container is replacing that one. So be careful with that as you go through that process. This looks right to me, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on confirm. At that point, it's created every tag and every trigger that I need, also all my variables. So the first thing I need to do is to go and set my variable. So I call it the Ticketure stream ID and go in here and paste that particular value. So put that in place, save that item. And then I reuse that through all of my tags. And so all my tags from add to cart, begin checkout, manage is the one against self-exchange, remove from cart, and all those items that you see in place there. So this all puts it in a Ticketure folder that, again, if you don't want it in the folder, you could easily go in and modify that container, but this puts it nicely in its own little place, creates all the triggers. Those triggers are the things that need to be modified. It's because, again, we're firing on an event, and we also say that the page host name contains a website address. And by default, we just make these ticketure.com. This wouldn't fire for any of you. So we just need to go in there and modify that particular one. Again, we use the page host name on here just because, again, if there's somewhere else on your site, you're using Shopify or using some other type of system that may be also using that add to cart event, and you're using the same container. You'd want to make sure that you segmented out which one was a Ticketure add to cart and which one was a regular one. So I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to change up this to say P1 ticks. That is our demo side. And I click on save. And then just do that to all of them really quickly. You can set this up manually if you want. There are steps to do so on that KB article, but I'm a little lazy. So but there has to be a better way. And so these in here really fast. And you guys would just copy paste your domain in there. And last but not least, review item. So at that point, I'm pretty much ready to go. So in 30 minutes or less, I've told you all about GA4 and I've configured it. I do want to test it out. I mean, obviously I'd have to publish this or submit it, but what I have the ability to do with both Google Analytics and with the GA4 side is I do have the option of what is called the debug view. Actually, there's one other piece I didn't. So we do need to set that that tag ID. So let me back up. So we do need to set this guy inside. Oh, no, we don't. Sorry. We need to set your Google Tag Manager ID. This GTM blah, blah, blah needs to go inside your Ticketure instance. So I think this is actually filtered by user. I don't know fully if you guys are able to configure this, but if you aren't, let us know. But this is just what's called the GTM container ID. So you put that GTM container ID inside, just a text field, and that then tells Ticketure to start sending those out. You'll have the global one. That's the one that, again, we're using, and firing off the same events as well so we can track these types of items. But you set that value, that then starts sending the GA4 formatted items. If you're using UA, and you put this value in there, you'll get all the actions, but you won't get the purchase. The purchase format changed from V3 to V4. So there'll be a $0 on the purchase side. But that is it. So now I'm able to go in here and hit preview. So I go into the preview side. It's going to ask me which site do I actually want to preview. And I'm going to go ahead and you can type in a new value. Obviously, I've hit this one before. And I'm also going to tell Google Analytics to go into debug mode. And so with these two sitting side by side, I now can connect out to my Science Center site. Tells me I'm in that particular mode. And what I can do at that point is I can start watching what happens within each of these. And so you can see here, this page loaded, my events page. It fired off the Ticketure page view, which is what I wanted. It also fired off the stream ID, which is just a configuration file. That'll fire every single time. You'll see the ones that it didn't fire down here. But as I go through this process, it'll continue to fire them. And so if I go scroll down and let's just grab Top Gun Maverick, put that in play. I fire that particular item. I now see my page view. I also see my view item pop in. So now I can go into this, take a look at it and see what is happening. You can also see on this left-hand side, all of the actions that are happening. So if I look at view item, I go, hey, what in the world's in that data layer? So those are the types of things. Maybe your marketing team would be like, hey, what's going on? How can I see X? How can I see Y? And so we do have a format in that knowledge base article that we're sending data into. Obviously, the item ID is the GUID from the event itself. The item name is the name of the event. The item category will be the event category. Once I start adding things into the basket, you'll get things like the ticket group name, the ticket type name, the price, all of those particular items. And so it's great to see that GTM is actually firing, but I also can pop over here to Google Analytics and it's also receiving. So I want to see those two things happening. So it received that I got Top Gun, quantity of 1, everything's looking good from that perspective. I then can continue on down the way. So you can see that as I scroll around, it'll say scroll. So that's what I'm saying. If you actually wanted to dig a little bit further and see, who's scrolling around on my pages a bunch, or who's doing what, when, and where, those types of actions can be consumed and fired. So I grab a time. I'm going to go ahead and grab 2 items here, put that down, and then I want to add those into my basket. So I'll pop back over to Google Tag Manager. Got back into my tags. I now have my add to cart tag. Everything's all been firing. This is awesome. Add to cart. What was added to cart? I can see any errors. I can see, again, the data layer is the big thing. The top stuff we don't care about. It's the stuff down here at the bottom. Top Gun was added. Its category is IMAX. I grabbed an admission event. It was an adult and it was tickets. So this one actually will tell me if it's a membership, if it's a gift card. So that's what we call the handler. And so it'll be tickets, membership, gift card. There's also one called code. So if you're doing the new way we do gift of membership, where you can actually buy a code for redemption, that'll say code. A lot of different ways. And again, all this is outlined in that particular KB article. What was my quantity? Did they apply a coupon? Was there a discount applied? What was the price, etc. So all of that is looking great. And then again, you can see the add to cart event being fired here, and it just kind of keeps on playing through as you go through that whole process. So I'll add in one more item. Say I want to go tomorrow, 2 adults, 2 kids, sure. Threw those in the basket as well. So all this, it's a little bit behind as it goes through the process of telling me this, but it'll eventually get all in there. Also, if you click on it, often it'll pause it. And so you can see up here, it'll be like, it'll just say click to unpause, and you'll see, it's just kind of pulling these up, waiting for me to review my piece. So just pieces there as you're troubleshooting, looking for it. Go to checkout. I now can get on the checkout page, start my process here, put in the card information, put in my details, oops. Put in my address, whatever. And maybe I'll add in a donation, who knows? All those kind of things are just parts of things that are happening. You can see that again, checkout was fired. This thing will catch up with me adding the cart and everything else along the way. And then I hit complete order. And again, I can go back to GTM, see if those things are actually firing, which I'm sure they are. And then, yes, here's my purchase action. I sit over here, you'll have a nice big green checkbox once the purchase action comes in. And so all of it takes just a second or so, especially once you start loading it up a bit. The debug mode is a little bit behind schedule most of the time. There we have our purchase. So all the different purchase actions. It does give me 2 of them. I could give a pop quiz if people could tell me why, but it gives me 2 of them because Ticketure actually is configured to give tickets on one email and donations on another. So that this one will be my donation item, and then my other one will be my tickets. So it's not uncommon to see those kind of things, but that's just the way Ticketure is making sure that those items get their own special email confirmation. And again, all this information is available. It's the data layer that's coming through from the fact it's tickets all the way up through price, categories, et cetera, all throughout those particular areas, $28 one, a $35 one, all of that being reported on. So from that standpoint, it is 100% operational. The only thing that would be left for me to do is to go over here and hit submit. So it is in preview mode. If the person is normally hitting the site, it's not doing anything. If I was to hit submit, I can give it a nice fancy name if I want, or I can just say publish and then skip that. And then I sing like no one is listening because that's my best. And then it's live. So from that point forward, anytime I go to my lovely Ticketure homepage, I would see this information. And so the cool thing about this is it starts collecting immediately. The bad thing about it is it doesn't report on anything. It's a 24-hour delay on reporting. So, if I go and do a quick little bump out to the site, it will give me that user. I'm looking at real-time kind of analytics. It's going to give me that particular user, that particular location, what they were doing, et cetera. All my actions, et cetera. But if I want to go and report on this quickly, like, ooh, what's the demographics on this person, or what's the, my e-commerce side, all that is on a 24-hour delay. So if I was to go into here, it's just going to show me nothing, which is a little bit annoying. But it does get in there, obviously, because it does have all that particular data in play. And so once you get that in there, I'll just pop over to our production global side, just as a comparison. But you get nice little charts all over the place. You can go up here to the home page, look at how many people are hitting the sites. This is across about 40 of our customers at this point. So we're able to easily look and see kind of what's going across. Where's the cities that are going? So here's those insights I was talking about. So social appeared much higher on my conversion path from month over month. And so different things like that are easily able to be seen. I mentioned the explore options. And if I do pop into the explore path, I've just got one report that I run all the time. And again, you can go through here quickly and easily and say how many people are doing by screen size. These were those ones that I showed earlier, with their various browsers. With the amount of data that we have, it does take it a little bit of seconds to run, but it is going to analyze up and give me, again, from the mobile, Safari, who's doing what, when, where, desktop, by device, et cetera, stuff you've always used from Google Analytics. And then this is, again, the views by funnel and so forth. And again, I didn't do a lot of work, lazy programmer. And so I'm just saying I want a standard funnel look across these items, looking at those touch points that I showed earlier about how many times the person was touched along the way. Those are underneath the traffic acquisition or these other types of items. E-commerce purchase is one of my other favorite ones. Let me see which products are doing well and how things are rolling, which pages are being hit. All these are really, really awesome to play with. I'll kind of skip a lot of these. They advertise the conversion pass is what I was meaning by the how many times people get touched along the way. So various pieces there. So direct is them coming straight from your site to us. We're not tracking anything at that point. There is a UTM and tracking capability. If you can send it to us, we will store it. We also can report on it now in Kibana. I mentioned that in the last one, but if you can send all that and make it, configure to pass that down, most systems will do that nowadays with GA4. UA did it pretty well. But if it had a search come in, it would keep that throughout the whole session. So that should be pretty good along the way. So with that is our Google Analytics site. So very straightforward and easy, especially with that container. And again, I'll test it all out. And it looks like everything's hooked up and working with it. You guys helped me test that. So we'll put it up there on the link so you guys can save a little bit of time in that setup process. So with that, I can kind of conclude this part and kind of open it up for any Q&A questions that you guys may have, or if somebody really wants to talk and ask a question. I wonder if you can raise your hand or whatever happens, or there's an allow to talk button, which is kind of fun. So we'll give it a couple questions to see if anybody has, or a couple minutes to see if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, we will post this to the discussion board, the recording. You guys can watch it again if you need to. No questions. Either I did a really good job or everyone's still drinking their coffee. I'm not sure. I'll go ahead and stop the recording as well. Thank you guys for joining. We'll have more of the